Hello everyone and welcome to Novel for GCSE. In this video, I'm going to be sharing with you a 4-mark essay about attitudes towards men in Pride and Prejudice, which I wrote when I was doing my GCSEs because it could have been a possible question for me and now even for you guys since it still hasn't come up yet. So there's lots of techniques and some mistakes, but I will correct them so that you don't copy that, and feel free to pinch any inspiration from this. So this is my introduction. Now, normally I would start my introductions talking about context and then moving on, filtering it down to talking about within the book or the play. So in this case, you can see during the Regency era, marital affairs were of the utmost importance within society. All unmarried women and their mothers targeting all the bachelors available. So here I'm talking contextually about the time, suggesting that marriage was really important, of the utmost importance. You can see I've framed the sentence as if it was a declarative. It was a fact. Marital affairs were of the utmost importance. Now this is quite secure and it's a really good way to start your essay because it suggests you've done your research, you're really connected with the era that this was written in, and you've done a lot of research and studying for behind it. So we've talked about how all unmarried women and their mothers targeting the bachelors available. So that's contextually, and then I've zoomed in to the novel itself. So within Pride and Prejudice, the reader acknowledges that for most marriages, the woman must compromise in order to ensure her economic security. So within Pride and Prejudice, the women have to make sacrifices in order to ensure financial stability. And therefore, words like therefore within your essay is really good. It suggests you're moving from one point to another and it's flowing. So, therefore, she must bow down to the faults of the other sex, or otherwise is also a good word because it's saying either you do that or you do that. Provide the falsity of rose tinted glasses on men. So, this introduction doesn't say in this essay I'm going to talk about this, this, and this, but it does what the purpose of an introduction is. It gives you a taster of the key themes within this essay, and in this case, it's going to be talking more about marriage. Now, initially, Austen presents all single men as possible bachelors that every mother and daughter hunt for in this competitively brutal system. So, this is my first paragraph. Now, for each paragraph, you should begin with a point that is a declarative. So, in this case, Austen presents all single men as bachelors that every mother and daughter hunt for. So, we've linked the single men, the topic, the question itself, because we're talking about attitudes towards men, to the themes that we were talking about. Within the extract, the ladies are caught, embedded quotes here, caught and struck with the stranger's air. So embedded quotes are really useful. Now, the verbs caught and struck both imply the fixation placed on available masculine entities. A possible method of Austen's cynicism plays into the physical and exacerbated perception that women have with men. So what we're saying here is that firstly we've zoomed in. So we've talked about our point, we've got our evidence, we've zoomed in on the verbs caught and struck, and they imply that women are fixated upon men. And then we're talking about ideas. So what's the reader's purpose? So hopefully you can see that this is a good Peter paragraph. Austen's cynicism plays into this physical and exacerbated perception that women have with men. So Austen's highlighting that women were perceived to be, engaged and just so overwhelmed by men, and that's it, and that's all they cared about. The reader. So here we've talked about the writer, now we're talking about the reader. The reader can trace back to the very beginning in which the declarative assertion, single men must all be in want of a wife, because that was the first line, that the modal verb must communicates the reader's sarcastic undertones, whilst delivering such an absolute truth. So, what's also interesting about how I've written this is that I've used a quote here and then I've related it back. So, I've used a quote from the extract and then I've related it back to a quote outside of the extract in the beginning of chapter 1. Now, the prospect of men seemed to excite all the females within Pride and Prejudice, both the young girls and their accompanied mothers. So there you go. We've done our Peter paragraph and we've now started another Peter paragraph. So this is the next point, that men excite both the daughters and the mothers alike. Even with Mr. Darcy's introduction, Mrs. Bennet admitted initially he was very handsome. So another embedded quote, in which the intensifier very overindulges into the mother's fantasy of which her daughter could marry safely. So it's that her mother is getting very overexcited. Darcy and Wickham can hugely act as foils throughout the novel. I've just made this bigger, so they can act as foils throughout the novel. However, the common nature of the excitement from the community at their arrivals, partially supposed by the initial lines, and how they act universally. So women universally act very excited, no matter whether the man is a scoundrel like Wickham or a good man like Darcy. They both have the same excitement, which suggests naivety in women, how they don't exactly care the personality, they just care if it's a single man with good fortune to be a marriage prospect. Now, this, however, flips the very perspective, for it is that they rely on the predator like relationship. So the women become enticed with the arrival of the male prey to tighten and to frighten them into marriage. Now, Austen's direct lines in the beginning conveys her successful attempt to exacerbate the human folly at the unreeling interest that society plays towards men, but secondarily highlights the integral and vital prospect of marriage as a bondage more than, a relationship during the contemporary periods. Austen heavily satirizes the naive value of women and also includes some comical reliance on that. Okay, so let's move on to the second paragraph now. I hope you understood the first paragraph. Austen heavily satirizes the naive society of Meryton and how the comical reliance on first impressions, and how there is a comical reliance on first impressions. So that's our next point. She's basically making fun of how the society is using first impressions as their whole viewpoint of society. And we see here is readily used to construct one's first impressions is readily used to construct one's entire character. Within the extract, Austen presents this unflawed and embedded quote perfect male of Mr. Wickham through the focalizer character of the giddy female characters. The semantic field of perfection in completely charming, greatly in his favour, the best parts of beauty, perfectly correct, happy, unassuming. This imitates the illogical conclusions that these girls are internally making via a character who has not so much like said a single thing and been in their presence for greater than 10 seconds. So what Austen's doing is she's really mocking how they have got so much to say about someone who has not even said a single thing. Austen implies how perceptions and first impressions are not to be trusted, despite the entire of the community's reliance on it. Now, we've talked about Austen, we've talked about our quotes, moving on to the reader. So the reader acknowledges this very same reliance on first impressions through the character of Darcy in chapter 3. So here again, we're moving away from the extract. However, being foil to Wickham due to the polar opposite effect. Austen described the Meryton community's initial impression of Darcy as his character was decided. He was the most proud man in the world. Now, the declarative and the The assurance from the omniscient narrator seems to be underlying with satire and sarcasm, as the verb decided, as well as the hyperbole in the world, portrays the instantaneous and often unreliable nature of these initial meetings. Both these eligible bachelors, after receiving equivalent care and interests by the society, acted as foils to one another, indicating the obtuse pride from Darcy in comparison to the charming infatuation of Wickham. The original title of the very novel was First Impressions, implying Austen's purposeful focus onto flawed aspects of Regency society. So Austen's aim was to focus on what was wrong with the society and how everyone focused on things that were clearly too wrong. Now, as the chapters draw to a close, so this is our third paragraph, Austen's evidence evidently exposes the truthfully mistrust of the first impressions, due to the foil characters of Darcy and Wickham. Elizabeth, after overcoming her naivety, concludes one had all of the goodness, and the other had all the appearances of it. Now, the reader learns the greedy and manipulative Wickham, as opposed to the kind hearted Darcy. The contemporary reader may have displaced their perception of their reliance on first impressions, when in reality they're misleading on both sides of the spectrum. So that was a bit of waffling, but what I was trying to say there was that from the reader not even knowing that truly Darcy was a good person and that Wickham was in fact the bad villain, through the reader even being confused, this suggests to the reader that even our first impressions were wrong. Not only was Elizabeth's wrong, but so was ours, and that's why Austen's saying we need to change something. So this foreshadows, where were we? We were here. Linking back to earlier in Pride and Prejudice, where Darcy begs, "Do not sketch my character," foreshadowing how the vague and easily misconstructed beginnings and sketching and introductions can clearly indent a false narrative of one's true intentions. Austen here uses situational irony between the final dispositions of Wickham and Darcy to translate the risks of misreading a character. For Wickham, it irreversibly led to the running away of the Bennet sisters and almost the ruining of their whole family, and separating him from the pure love with Elizabeth. So it could have very near. What I'm saying here is, it's so the Austen's trying to show the power of misreading a person, because it could have led to the absolute destruction of the Bennet family. Austen's comical use of satire aims to unearth the flaws at which many of the contemporary societies stood for in relation to marriage. Charlotte, a female character whose blunt and pragmatic opinions regarding the nature of men that sometimes, quote, "knowing as little as you can be the best prospects of marriage," was in many ways a reality for most newly married women. So what Charlotte was saying, that was knowing the least about your partner is probably the best way to go, because then it wouldn't, turn you off the prospect of marriage. However, Austen's craft does not only aim to disregard tradition, for her acceptance of Charlotte's satisfaction suggests that in some ways the lack of awareness about a partner was truly necessary. So Austen isn't just, critiquing the Regency society. She is also saying that sometimes it is necessary, because love marriages aren't always the option, and when you don't have an option, then you can be like Charlotte and be satisfied in your own life. Thank you for watching. If you found this video helpful, don't forget to subscribe. If you want to see more of my grade 9 essays, just comment down below and I'll show them. I don't mind if you pinch any techniques from them, or use the whole essay. It's up to you guys. Thank you so much for watching. Best of luck in your exams. Do tell me how they go, and see you soon.